guys, how you doing? This is Mike from songwritingresources.com. Today I wanted to talk about the songwriting of Bob Dylan and see if we can start to maybe implement some of his techniques. As most of you know, probably the quintessential songwriter of the modern era. I'm sure there's room for debate about that, but certainly has left a massive legacy and a massive influence on many artists. Everybody from Tom Petty to John Lennon, David Bowie, even Chris Martin from Coldplay. If you haven't checked out the Coldplay How to Write a Song, that's on my channel as well, so check that out. But in the meantime, stay tuned because we're going to take a look at the master craftsman himself, Bob Dylan. Okay, so the first thing I want to take a look at is the influence of folk music on Dylan. And then based on that, how can we learn from what Dylan drew from folk in his songwriting and then apply that sort of principle into our own writing, whether or not you're a folk musician or a rock musician or R&B or whatever you write. The big takeaway from this first part is that even a master craftsman like Bob Dylan doesn't start with a blank canvas. And it's important to, number one, establish your musical roots. And the way to do that is to play just a ton of cover material. And number two, to draw from the music that you study to repurpose those ideas and themes and songwriting techniques, but then also to put your own spin on it. One of the things that's interesting about Bob Dylan's music is that you can see the influence if you look at some of the folk music from around the time period. One of my favorite Dylan tunes is Don't Think Twice, It's Alright, which I'll play for you in a second. Don't Think Twice, It's Alright was written around 1962, and I think it was released in 1963. Interestingly enough, there was a song written by Paul Clayton in 1960, so 2 to 3 years prior, that was called Who's Gonna Buy You Ribbons When I'm Gone? So I'm gonna play that too, and compare the two and see if you notice any parallels between the two. It ain't no use just sitting aside now, darling. It ain't no use just sitting and cry now. It ain't no use to sit and wonder why now, darling. Just wonder who's gonna buy your ribbons when I'm gone. Well, it ain't no use to sit and wonder why, babe, if you don't know by now. Oh, it ain't no use to sit and wonder why, babe, it'll never do anyhow. When your rooster crows the break of dawn, look out your window and I'll be gone. You're the reason I'm traveling on, but don't think twice, it's alright. So with Dylan, when he was pretty young, it was like right after high school, he moved to New York and he started to really pursue folk music. He spent 3 or 4 years basically eating, sleeping, breathing folk music. He went to bed with his guitar. He played anywhere that he could. And according to interviews with Dylan, he feels like during this period he picked up the vernacular of folk. And it was in this time that he sort of figured out what works and what doesn't work with regard to songwriting. And to him, much of his songwriting, especially the early folkier stuff, was mostly a continuation of a tradition. There was a precedent to him. In a Music Cares Person of the Year speech in 2015, he explained that the songs that he wrote didn't just come out of thin air. I didn't just make them up out of whole cloth. There was precedent. It all came out of traditional music, traditional folk music, traditional rock and roll, and traditional big band, swing, and orchestra. So he was also into Buddy Holly, Elvis Presley, people like that were on the radio that he grew up with. Well, Bob Dylan has said in certain of his interviews that he spent a lot of time meditating on songs. In other words, he would think about a song kind of in the same way that somebody might stare at a crack in the ceiling until the song that he was thinking about started to morph into something original. So does that mean that copyright infringement is okay? Is it okay to just sort of rip people off? Well, no, that's not the point here. The idea is that there's no reason to start with a blank canvas. You can take music that you're influenced by, songs that you cover over and over and over and over again, and you'll start to derive from playing these songs a certain vernacular, a certain code for what works, for what doesn't work, certain types of language, certain songwriting techniques. Could be like the form of the song, it could be the lyrical content, it could be what types of chords, what types of guitar skills or piano skills or whatever types of things are required to perform those songs. And you can take what you learn and you can repurpose it in an artistic, inventive way. There's this famous quote by Pablo Picasso that says that good artists copy and great artists steal. Now, by stealing, Picasso didn't mean that you pawned something off as your own when you didn't in fact create it. Instead, stealing is not stealing the art itself, but it's taking basic principles, taking ideas from other great works, and finding a way to put your own unique imprint onto that music, to deliver it in a way that it's your own. Now for Dylan, one of the things that's interesting, we're going to get into this a little bit later in the third lecture, is the role of things like literary influence. So Bob Dylan was pretty well read. He read a lot of great works of literature and poetry, and a lot of that stuff kind of infused itself with the folk music to create something very uniquely Dylan-esque. Okay, so how can you implement all of this into your own writing? Well, the first thing to take away from this is do your homework. So Dylan spent 3 to 4 years playing tons and tons of folk music, performing the folk music, and basically living, eating, sleeping, drinking, breathing folk music. If you want to write at the level of Dylan, you have to do the same thing. It doesn't have to be folk music, but play the music that you love. It could be modern day contemporary top 40 songs. Learn all of them. Play those songs, play them in different keys, perform those songs, and eventually what'll start to happen over time is you'll start to adapt from those songs. You'll start to write things that emulate or sound like maybe they could have been written by a certain artist. You could have inserted the song that you wrote onto one of their albums or something like that. And you're going to start to write music that's at the level of the music you're already performing and playing. The second thing to say, though, is to make sure that you infuse yourself into the music. Infuse your own personality, your own life experience, your own influences outside of the music you're playing from your life so that you can have something to add and contribute. Just as a final thought, I want to say that learning from other people is a huge part of the craft of songwriting. Great songwriters hardly ever write from a vacuum. They are influenced by other songwriters. And probably the greatest lesson of songwriting that we can get from Dylan is that any secret sauce that exists to great songwriting is scattered about in your very own record collection. Hey guys, I hope you really enjoyed the video. If you're into this kind of content about songwriting, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel. There's going to be plenty more posted over time, and you'll get notifications also if you hit the little bell icon to know when there's new material. Also feel free to check out my website, www.songwritingresources.com. There's a blog post that goes along with the video presentations that has a lot more depth of content. So if you want to check that out and get even a little bit more information sort of synthesized and written in a sort of organized way, feel free to check that out, www.songwritingresources.com. Have a nice rest of your day. Take care.